that code will stay in the upper right-hand corner, so if you haven't joined yet, you will have that opportunity. Bless you, Jess. And as we get started, just from the cover slide here, we can see two types of protections we're talking about. Insurance, that may not be quite obvious from that image, but it will become clear as we get into it. And then from this political cartoon, the other element we're going to be talking about is something called tort reform. The objectives for this, especially in the first half, are pretty personally applicable. At least I hope you will find them personally applicable and also persuasive. I'll say it now and I will say it again just for the sake of full disclosure. I'm not an insurance salesman. Unless through my 403B, which is like the teacher version of a 401k, I'm invested in insurance companies. I don't specifically hold stocks in any insurance companies, but I'm going to try to persuade you of the value of insurance-based protections for yourself against torts. And then as we move on to the second form of protection, I want you to understand both sides in the U.S. debate over tort reform legislation. And this one's also going to be pretty personally applicable, whether you support it or oppose it. Tort reform is something that comes up. I wouldn't be surprised in our state if it doesn't end up in legislation originating in our General Assembly or through the initiative process. And in addition to understanding that, I want you to be able to form your own opinion, express it articulately to others, and defend it with logic and evidence. So those are our objectives. As we get into insurance, we kind of need to know what insurance is. So please don't bother to look it up. I just kind of want you to shoot from the hip. Tell me what you think insurance is. Thank you. Sir. Let's take another half minute for some of you to wrap up your answers. Yeah, Mary. Yes, you may. Let's take another 15 seconds. I know that's piecemeal, but some of you are very close to wrapping up, I can tell. Okay, lots of good responses. I'm going to highlight several, capture key elements. So it is protection of valuables and life. Now, I think it's two ways we can think about that. And that's usually is expressed with this when we think of it as something that protects us against damages to ourselves or our things. Or in the case of this one, also in case something goes wrong with our health, right? Or we die, right? And we all die. Right? So those are all true. And it is a contractual relationship. You pay them money and they protect you. Okay, and that's kind of covered with that one as well. So it is, in fact, a contract between, on the one hand, you and an insurance company. And usually in life, you will have relationships with at least 3 different insurance companies. Not everybody will get life insurance. That would be the third, but likely have some kind of insurance for your home, an automobile, and then you will separately have health insurance, most often, at least in this country, through an employer. We're going to be thinking more about this in terms of the kind of insurance you carry on your home or your car. And the way this contractual relationship works is you have a policy with the insurance company, and every month you pay, well, not necessarily every month, the different payment formats, but on some schedule, you pay them premiums, which is what we call the money, the fee you pay to the insurance company. And that's true whether we're talking about car insurance, life insurance, or health insurance. And for our purposes in this class, especially talking about torts, our focus is going to be on the insurance company's promise that they will cover your costs, whether money you might owe in damages, if you are liable for a tort, but also perhaps legal representation in a tort case. And that is a may, which is also a maybe. They will represent you in court. A lot of that is going to depend on how much money the insurance company is likely to have to pay up if you are found liable for that tort. They are not going to represent you just out of a feeling of responsibility to you as a policyholder and a premiums payer. They are doing this because representing you may save them money in the end by limiting what they have to pay to the plaintiff through your policy. I don't say this to make insurance companies sound like the bad guy. One thing to think about with insurance, when you pay those premiums go to cover things that the insurance company has had to pay out to other policyholders. If insurance companies spend all kinds of money on legal fees and other things, everybody will have to pay higher premiums. So when you need the insurance company to pay up, you absolutely want them to pay up. But if you don't have a claim, you want your premiums to stay low. And that's kind of the tight place that insurance companies are put in. At the same time, there are some cases where you can certainly find what they do to be reprehensible. Of all of the tort protection insurances, this is going to be the one that most people, at least in the United States, will have interactions with, and that is an auto insurance company, an auto insurance policy. And that is because drivers in this country are, in almost all cases, required to carry liability protection for themselves as a driver. The only exceptions, well, and I'm not familiar with how the laws are set up in other states, but in the state of Missouri, you either have to carry liability insurance on yourself as a driver, or you have to prove financial responsibility, which means you've got a ton of money sitting around waiting to pay out in case you hurt somebody while driving your vehicle. That's it. So most of us don't have giant piles of cash or liquid assets sitting around waiting to pay someone if we hurt them, so we have insurance. And the reason for this, in case no one ever told you, is that motor vehicles, cars, trucks, SUVs, all these things are dangerous. Especially, and no offense to big truck drivers. When I was a younger man, I also drove a big truck, but now they make them bigger and harder to see, like pedestrians in front of you. Because apparently Americans like a grill that is like 6 to 7 feet tall. That's an exaggeration, but if you guys walk around a parking lot, those trucks have gotten even bigger and boxier. And even if we're not talking about one of those, motor vehicles in general are dangerous. At some point, I'm going to change the statistics here, but until things totally smooth out after the pandemic, we're going to use pre-pandemic stats. So in 2019, in the United States, there were almost 40,000 crash deaths. So there we're talking about more than half the population of this city of St. Joseph. Actually, we lost people between the last census, so it's even more than like a bigger chunk of the population than it was back in 2010 when the population was about 77,000 people. In addition to that, almost 4.5 million people were injured in car crashes. And if deaths and injuries were not enough, there is also an economic, financial cost to motor vehicle accidents. Medical bills. Medical care in the United States is very expensive. And vehicle repairs are also very expensive. Especially as cars get more and more sophisticated technologically. The other form of insurance that lots of people in the United States will have at some point in their life is homeowners insurance. I don't talk about renters insurance here, not because I have anything against renters. I spent a fair chunk of my life as a renter. But renters insurance, that one really is just about protecting your stuff from damage or theft. That's it. Your landlord has to cover the kind of insurance that protects that property from torts. Homeowners insurance does do some of the same stuff as renters insurance. It does this thing that is what most of you and most people in general think about when they think of homeowners insurance. It protects you in case somebody breaks into your house and steals your stuff or damages your things. But for our purpose, what is important is that homeowners insurance also provides some liability protection against torts. Here we're talking about torts that occur on your property, and especially negligence torts. That's the part of homeowners insurance people usually think much less about. Most people, and rightly so, think about how much protection they need for their stuff in case it gets damaged. There are even those particular worrywarts like me who carry earthquake insurance in the state of Missouri. If that does sound crazy, if we do have an earthquake here, it's likely to be a big one. Because the last one, a little more than 200 years ago, was a very big one. There are also insurance policies that protect you specifically as an individual. And here in the Pear Deck, I want you to answer what kind of people would need to carry liability insurance for themselves as individuals. And here, I'm not talking about automobile insurance that includes liability for us as drivers. What kinds of other people would need to carry some kind of liability insurance for themselves? Don't look it up. I'm much more interested in what you think right off the tops of your heads. Let's tack on about another minute. Take another 15 seconds or so, wrap up your answers. Most of you that are still typing look to be very close. Okay. All right, so let's go with the first and the last answers here. So people who have extreme or dangerous professions where they're responsible for other people's lives, yes. This answer very similarly, although in the case of people in the military, there you have a lot of immunities built into what you do. I don't know how similar it is to like qualified immunity for law enforcement, but a lot of you're protected by other things. If Tim becomes a United States soldier and we invade some other country again, and Tim has to kill people, this all sounds awful. Sorry, Tim. It's not because I think you strike me as somebody who wants to go kill people, but I mean that's kind of a big part of what militaries do. People can't sue Tim for deaths that he has caused. I mean, he could be found to be criminally liable in military courts for something that he's done. But they have a lot of protections for those, including from torts, and most of what military people do is going to happen in other countries or on military property. But certainly other dangerous jobs, company owners, not necessarily because what they do is dangerous, but they interact probably with more people and might have more assets that somebody could take. All right, here, homeowners, gun owners, and renters, good answers all. And then this answer, the person who typed this may not have felt that was a good answer, but it is perhaps the truest answer of all, at least in my opinion, something that anyone could and should consider having. So lots of good answers, even a person who may have doubted themselves. Okay. So in terms of professions that are responsible for other people's lives, either medically or legally, doctors and lawyers need to carry liability insurance, doctors for medical malpractice. But remember, we also talked about people being able to sue lawyers for legal malpractice. And that is exactly what we're talking about, malpractice insurance, where you have harmed somebody, right, through what malpractice means is bad practice. This does not protect you in all aspects of your life, but it specifically protects you from liability that might result from your professional activities. And if any of you want to become physicians, surgeons, something like that, malpractice insurance is very expensive. Likely you would get it through your employer. It's one of the reasons there aren't that many independent doctors' offices anymore. It's just hard even for a group of doctors to afford malpractice insurance. From lawyers, I expect that it's much more affordable, or that a lot of lawyers don't get it. Okay, people who own guns, especially people who carry guns, and I'm not talking here about law enforcement or in the military. I mean private citizens carrying their own personal firearms, owning their own personal firearms. This can cover a lot of different expenses. In this case, I'll just mention a lot of them don't just cover you in the case of a tort. They might cover legal expenses if you were charged with a crime. For the torts part, they may cover you to pay damages to a plaintiff, right? If you, and this was something I had family members that went through concealed carry training programs back when our state required that you go through a certification process before you get concealed carry. You still can go through that process, and you need to if you want to be able to carry concealed in other states that have what's called reciprocity with Missouri, where if you have a concealed carry permit here, you can conceal carry in their state. But in our state now, we have what's called constitutional carry, which means if you just want to carry concealed here or conceal a weapon in your car, you don't have to have a permit to do that. But what that long explanation was winding up to, some of those family members, when they went through it, their instructors said, for every time you pull the trigger, you had better have $100,000 to cover the resulting legal fees or damages you may have to pay. I don't know exactly where that number came from, but it's always stuck with me, and it does make sense. If you use your firearm, either the person you hurt intentionally or somebody else who might be harmed, you might be exposed to a lot of liability. That same kind of insurance might also help cover your legal representation, or in the case of that criminal side of it, it may spring you out of jail with bail or bond, and it might make up for your wages if you are either incarcerated because you're convicted or at least, I think, held in jail awaiting trial. And there's an advertisement for just that kind of policy. Do I want to get into that? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Excess liability insurance is known to us as umbrella policies, or as we're going to see, we won't get to this until next time we talk about this, which will be Friday. Also, sometimes called by insurance companies a PUP. Why they needed to come up with something other than an umbrella policy for a nickname, I don't know. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm not going to have you guys do the pair deck on this, because this gets more at that suggestion from our previous pair deck questions, kind of something that everybody should consider. And why are we getting that twice? We don't need that twice. Okay. This, right, shows examples of the people who should have one of these excess liability or umbrella policies. So if you have lots of money, or if you have other assets, like somebody could try to go after your retirement accounts, those are assets. Go after your home. Well, not home. You can't take your home or personal transportation, but if you own lots of other property, they can come after that, maybe a farm. They can also, right, even if you're thinking, well, I don't have any money now, well, they might be able to get damages from your future income through things like garnishing your wages. I know garnishes sound like the parsley that somebody puts on the side of a plate to add to a meal, but garnishing here means taking stuff away. Oops. Some of you guys talked about business owners. Yes, lots of that stuff they could go after. One of the things that we didn't mention, people who have lots of interactions, especially with youth in activities where people get injured, youth sports, but also, activities where you might be accused of doing something wrong. Every time I attend a teacher's thing, and they talk about professional associations and how they offer liability insurance, I'm often the only male in the room, and people look at me like, for male teachers, you definitely need that extra liability insurance. I'm like, geez, thanks, guys. I kind of already got that, but way to drive the point home. Okay. People who participate in more dangerous hobbies, like hunting, where you could accidentally shoot somebody, or also skiing and surfing, okay, where somebody might drive their boat into something else. Happens all the time at the Lake of the Ozarks. If you own dangerous stuff on your property, like a swimming pool or a trampoline, right, people drown, people break limbs. It's dangerous. You could get sued. And then, I said property, especially if you own something that could be considered an investment, like maybe you're a landlord, and you could go after that stuff. Or if you own what's considered a dangerous dog breed. Yeah, Kaya. Yeah, what's the time limit on that exit slip? Just to start, go ahead and do that. I'll extend the limit out to 8:15 so that you guys have the full time to do that. Thank you, Kaya. For you dog people, and I'm also a dog person, we'll talk about dangerous breeds when we circle back to this on Friday. Exit slip is very much like the do now.